So when I was 9 years old, I came to this country. The United States, this is where it shifts, right? It becomes a framework in which, when I first encountered the bigotry, the hostility, the hatred of the poor, a lot of the problems in this country, I was already coming out of an environment that affirmed my humanity, you see? So to try to tell me I was not valuable, or that my mother wasn't valuable, or my brothers or my cousins. And you can't tell me also, because again, as I said, my family was very mixed. So you can't tell me that East Asian people or South Asian people, because I grew up intimately with this. So for me, a lot of people are people, family, cousins, relatives. I'm suddenly in an environment where they were not being called people. And I also noticed something also strange, because I also knew white people, because I had white relatives. Mm-hmm. So it was strange to me to be in a place where there were white people who had such an inflated sense of self. Mm. The presupposition that whoever you are as white, you're superior to everybody else, just struck me as weird. My response to it was not only outrage, but it was also at a very early age trying to figure out what is this nonsense. So in the process, there were a lot of things going on. But, you have to add to that, the period I'm talking about is the early 70s now, because I was born in the 60s. Mm-hmm. And there were so many of these cool things that happened in popular culture. First of all, Bruce Lee. I studied Kung Fu, but you know what I mean? You all don't know it now, but you have to imagine seeing Bruce Lee on the screen, especially if you're a person who's part Chinese, but you don't have to be, just to see a crowd of people just like Bruce Lee. Mm-hmm. Not only Bruce Lee, but this was the period, early 70s, with the blaxploitation films, they call them, but I don't like that term, because I saw a lot of the police corruption and problems in New York City. A lot of these movies were just telling the truth, about how the police was managing the drug industry and profiting from it. And I saw that stuff, so it was interesting seeing those things. The other thing, too, was at that time, there were these cool older people, right? Cool. When I say cool, the first kind of cool were these amazing New York public high school teachers. A lot of people stereotype these places, but there were bad teachers, true, but there were so many good teachers. For instance, the very first teacher I had, the fact that I could even say her name, Miss DiTucci.
She had an impact on you.
DiTucci, but yeah, because she saw how much I loved writing. Mm-hmm. Every week, she put aside an hour of class for me to read to the class one of my stories. Wow. One of my essays.
That's crazy.
I had another teacher, Miss Tessier. I had another teacher, Miss Domini. I didn't know she was a twin. Later, I met her twin. They were identical. But Miss Domini, she did a similar thing. And this woman bought me a set of encyclopedias.
Wow.
Because she saw how much I loved reading, right? But she knew I had a penchant for science. So I I read every page of those encyclopedias. I was also doing, she noticed also, she was on to me. I loved science so much, I used to make science projects. Mm-hmm. But you could only enter one into the science fair. So I was actually making science projects for other kids as well. Because I wasn't interested in winning. I was interested in the science.
Free of charge?
Yeah. I was interested in the science. And so, and they all won. It was really cool. I was experimenting with everything from chemistry to, entomology, all the way through to physics, all kinds of stuff. Then, in middle school, I had a teacher who required, a social studies teacher required that we read the New York Times. Mm-hmm. I didn't show up reading the New York Times. He was like, "Why aren't you doing your homework?" I said, "I can't afford it," because we were really poor. Mm-hmm. He didn't believe me, so he said, Well, since I bring the New York Times in, you have to come into class an hour early in the morning so you could read the New York Times because that was part of assignment. Well, there I was, ready to go. So he would sit down. I would sit in the classroom and read the New York Times. And he noticed that I was really reading this stuff, which is really striking because for full disclosure, I have dyslexia. So for me, with all these things I was doing, I had to figure out different learning strategies, you see? So, and I didn't know, but that nobody told me it was that. And my uncle has it, my son has it, it's genetic. Anyway, after a while, he and I started having conversations. And they transitioned into philosophical conversations. We began to talk about Marx, Hegel, history, theories, all kinds of stuff. My 8th grade, and I could tell you, and then in the 8th grade, there was Miss Fearman. Miss Fearman gave me, and I still have it upstairs, my first copy of the autobiography of Malcolm X. Right, so this is a German Jewish teacher, okay, giving a young black kid the autobiography of Malcolm X. Okay, so this was the kind of New York environment. You see,
a lot more intimate.
Well, yeah, but also people saw themselves as part of something special. That it wasn't just trying to get you to take tests. It was funny. I forgot about some of these, but until I was talking with my daughter and son-in-law last night about this stuff, like how much I loved writing. New York City had the Regents, where I don't know if it still does, but the Regents were yet they had an essay section.
Right.
Yeah, and I just scored top in the state. So it was like that. But again, you had to love doing it. But there was this other cool thing. New York had jazz musicians. Jazz musicians.
Such as?
Oh, man. People like Eddie Locke, Roy Eldridge. I have a picture of Roy Eldridge with my eldest son when we were there at Roy Eldridge's birthday. Dr. Billy Taylor. The list goes on. Dizzy Gillespie would flow through. There was Charlie Purcell, Freddie Waits. The list just kept going of these musicians. But what was cool was the musicians, they saw themselves like those public school teachers. They didn't just see themselves as musicians. They saw themselves as responsible for the future of the music. So Billy Taylor and a group of other musicians took over a middle school in Harlem on the weekends. It was on, I think, 127th Park. I could be a little off. And created a thing called Jazzmobile. This is where jazz musicians would show up on Saturday mornings and Sunday mornings and just teach young people jazz. Everything from the technicality of theory, counterpoint, the musician would have large, big bands, everything like that, and it was so cool. And the thing that bugged me out was, when you think about it, these guys weren't being paid for this because Jazzmobile was $10 a year. The purpose of it was just to pay the electric bills and stuff to get to use it. A lot of those musicians would play the Village Gate, the Blue Note, wherever, till 3, 4 in the morning, and show up to teach us at 8 a.m.
Wow.
That, you know what I mean?
It's commitment. Yeah.
That's commitment. And there they are, ready to go. And you know what's bizarre? They always looked fresh. You know what I mean? Because, we would lug our way down there and they were like, ready to go, But so you could see just the beauty of people committed to the growth of people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know what I mean? I today I call it love. Because it's not just, an abstract thing. For them, we, inner city young people mattered. There were kids coming from the suburbs and so forth because they wanted in on the action. You know what I mean? These are some of the greatest jazz musicians of all time. In the living room upstairs, I have a picture of a lot of them. And New York was a very different world then. Nobody cared about your age. You know, you could go into a bar, 14 years old, whatever. Yeah, nobody cared. So what happened was I would go to these jazz clubs, and that moment would come where I would hear, "Yo, Louis, come on up and jam." And, you know, at that moment, it's like light comes on you, you know, and you're going on the stage, and then the jazz musician, whoever it was, whether it's Roy Eldridge or whoever, would go, and then you're like playing, you know, or doing your thing. So, wow, I'm off on a lot of tangents here.
Yeah, it's great though.
But the point, because what you're asking about is, I think the point I'm making, if we want to get it pedagogical, the point I'm making is it's not simply about something in you. It's about what is in a community. You see? Because I think what made me survive when my mother brought me home, because I have all kinds of genetic illnesses. It's not that those doctors were wrong, but I think what made me survive was the love. You see? All that love that was being given into a baby. Similarly, I think when we became immigrants in a very hostile environment, there was a wider community of love, not just my cousins, my mother, and so, because we were really dirt poor. I mean, like 7 people in a 1-bedroom apartment poor.
Do you mind me asking, where did y'all live?
We lived in the South Bronx.
South
we lived,
Bronx.
yeah. I mean, my mother was just in her 20s with with us there. I lived not too far from the Bronx Zoo, around Garden Street area.
Okay.
The school I'm talking about, the elementary school, is PS 32.
PS 32.
Right, and then after that we went over. My mother, because, oh my God, up until I was, let me get this right. Up until I was 40, I never lived in any one place longer than 3 years. So we were constantly moving. Then it was PS 89. It was JHS 135. That's the middle school, and I went to Vanderchild's High School. Okay, which Mr. Seltzer, the music teacher, and Margaret Walker, Patricia Walker, the music the chorus teacher, they were excellent. They trained us to be professional musicians. You see, so I think what was cool was we talk so much about treating people like they're these individuals who can just persevere everything. We fail to understand what a community of love brings. And I'm talking about New York City, because everybody, the comedians, you already know, they talk about being New York is like, what you looking at?
Yeah.
Who
It's
are
hard,
you?
yeah.
Well, that is one side of New York, but the other side of, I don't know what New York is like today. I don't live in New York anymore, but the New York I was in was community. I mean, you come out, because we live in crappy apartment tenements, You come outside, there'll be people playing, in the summers, playing congas, bass, upright. There were people who get in fights and stuff, There were all that stuff. And I got in a lot of fights, brutal fights. But at the same time, there were loving, caring people who took every opportunity to just make someone a little better.